Hey everybody.
Hey, how's it going?
So we're continuing our discussions on Project 3. I'm going to go through a sample intro and outline that I made for you guys, which we'll get to in a minute. But first, before we get into that, both of us want to tell you guys to please not be stressing out about this paper. We're going to be grading these really, really leniently. The main things that we're looking for is audience establishment, thesis, and of course citations. Citations more so than anything else, because I really don't want to neither of us want to have any academic integrity meetings, because they are a pain in the ass. And they would especially be a pain in the ass having to do virtually instead of in person.
Well, you had to do one.
Not virtually.
Well, I mean, you were Cody's.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I did one for a colleague of ours recently. So anyway, main thing is citations. Make sure you got all your good in-text citation, your works cited page, all that good stuff. We also wanted to suggest to you guys, especially to those of you who maybe don't have a topic figured out yet, or trying to find inspiration for a topic, to check out like some nature documentaries and things like that. We've been watching Planet Earth, just because we're nerds and like to watch nature documentaries, which is a really good show, and because they talk about a lot of different environmental issues and stuff like that on those shows, it may be that you find something that you're like, oh, that's pretty cool, or I'm passionate about that. So it could be that watching those shows gives you some inspiration for a paper topic. And I know that it used to be Planet Earth 2 was on Netflix. I don't know that it still is.
I don't think so. I think I searched for it the other day, but there are sort of substitute things like Our Planet and other things. So most of you I know have some access to Netflix some way or another, so you can find those on there if you like. You can also check out things like, what would be a good one? Food Inc. Food,
yes.
INC. Now, I will warn you, anything having to do with food or anything like that, there are going to be some moments where if you would prefer not to see the sausage made, don't watch.
Yeah, because they're going to go undercover in like slaughterhouses and stuff like that and explain the process, and a lot of times, that stuff is pretty graphic. Obviously, because animals are being slaughtered. So if you have a weak stomach, maybe don't go that route.
One that's not so bad. It's not bad at all. That I actually really, back in the day when I worked at Blockbuster, for those of you that are old enough to remember what that was, it was a box that you would go into filled with little boxes that you would take home and put into a medium-sized box, which would play on a big box. So anyway, it was called King Corn, and it might be on YouTube now. It might be on Netflix or one of the streaming services. It's real old and real indie, but it's basically about how corn makes up 90% of what we eat, even though we don't realize it or necessarily want to eat it.
You may also be interested, Jonathan absolutely hates this, but if you can find it, I'm pretty sure you could find it for free on the internet. There's a kind of think piece about the lobster industry that's called Consider the Lobster. I told you he hates it. But it's interesting because it talks about, the process of killing lobsters and whether or not it's humane and that kind of thing. And it's relatively short. It's about 6 pages long.
I do really, really like the author, his other stuff. It's written by a guy named David Foster Wallace, who's weird.
Yeah, he's a weird guy. It's a funny piece too. I mean, I think it's pretty funny.
Oh, it is funny.
The way he approaches it is
because he really
comical.
Doesn't have an opinion on it. He's just saying like, hey, it's really weird that people gather in large groups to basically dismember and celebrate dismembering like lots and lots of these crustaceans.
Of the sea.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah.
So yeah, that's something that you might consider. And you can also, if you don't have access to either of those things and you're really just struggling to come up with a topic, you can just Google trending environmental issues.
Or follow
that'd
Greta
be a consideration.
Thunberg.
Yeah, or follow Greta Thunberg. That would be funny as well. So yeah, there's all that. And of course, as always, you're more than welcome to email us. Or for my students, you can send me a Kick message. If you're really struggling to come up with something, we can work together. I've had a couple of you have reached out to me, and please do continue to do that. I'm more than happy to give you help and assistance, and so is Jonathan. So, yeah, that's that. So, like I said in the beginning, I've made a sample introduction and outline for this paper. So, my students, and I suppose your students too, you're not gonna let them do this topic, right?
What?
the Windows, the one from my sample.
Oh, I don't really care.
Oh, he doesn't care. Well,
yeah,
sorry. My students, you're not allowed to use this topic. You know how I do when I give you samples. You're not allowed to use my topic, first of all, because I've done a lot of the work for you as far as laying out the paper, and it's not fair for you to not come up with original stuff. So, sorry.
Now, for my students, if you decide to write on this for some weird reason, you can't use any of the stuff that Miss Parrish talks about. So you can write about, the improvement of mental health through window technology, but I don't care if you do that, but you can't argue any of the same stuff, or you can't use any of the same evidence that she uses. Okay?
So that's the deal with that. So we're going to go through this. Hold on one second. This is going to be a little... I'm going to get you to navigate the mouse, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Because that'll make things a little bit easier. So, okay. First of all, MLA formatting, as always. That's what your stuff is going to look like. My students can literally copy and paste this and just fix the name. For Mr. Willett students, of course, you would fix your name and put Mr. Willett, not Miss Parrish. You can also just put 13th of April as the due date. That's fine. Which is the due date for the paper. That's fine. And then, of course, header, page number, last name, all that good stuff.
Guys, I was not seeing very much of this in Project 2 from you, so make sure this time you do have page numbers in there and your last name before the page number, including page 1.
Yep, looks just like this. You can do this through, if you're not on a Mac, the way you do this is to go up to Insert. Can you navigate? Insert. All the way over here to the right, it's page number. Don't use the header option because that's not going to work. Hit page number, top of the page, and then you just hit plain number 3. And after you've done that, you can put your cursor right in front of the page number and type in your last name. So that's how you do that. On a Mac, you go up to the very, very top, like left side of your screen over here, and there will be the options, the same kind of options that Word has, like this, where it's got insert and all that. And it should be pretty similar of a process. If you're struggling too much, though, guys, just Google it. It's not super hard. Okay, so first things first, we've got a clear title. If I went and handed this to somebody on the street, they would know that I'm talking about Windows and mental health, right? They might not know exactly what my entire argument is, but they have some idea of what it is. So always wanting to have that clear original title. All right, and so here's our sample introduction. Having views of the natural world provides benefits to people, including improved mental health and performance. In fact, some studies have indicated that high school students with views of nature plan to attend college and partake in criminal activity less than... that's very poorly worded. It's insane. It tells... Okay, don't do that, because I worded that badly. Partake in criminal activity less than students without natural views. And I've got my citation. So last name, page number, that's what your MLA citations are going to look like. Notice that I'm citing here, even though I'm not directly quoting. It's a paraphrase, but it's not my thoughts. So it still needs a citation, whether you're paraphrasing or quoting.
And for my students, one thing I noticed when I was grading Project 2, now I was a little lenient about it this time. I will not be in the future. You cannot have a works cited page and then not have citations in the paper.
Yes, that's something that I've seen my students do as well. You have to use the citations that you put on your works cited page. There has to be an in-text citation for every citation on your works cited page, and vice versa. If you have an in-text citation, it has to have a full citation in your on your works cited page. So just make sure that we're doing that.
Yeah, this is not a bibliography, all right? This is not all the stuff that I read or used while I'm doing this. They are the works that you cite in the paper. That's why it's called works
cited. Okay, so, however, many students in North Carolina schools do not have significant access to natural views. School boards in North Carolina should consider installing windows, either real or virtual, for the benefit of North Carolina students. Okay, so that's my thesis. That's why I've got it highlighted. So we're noticing a few things. I'm being pretty specific here and limiting this to North Carolina. The reason for that is if you're talking about the U.S. as a country, there's going to be a lot of different issues state by state that might, it's going to be easier if you specify a smaller location, because then you're going to have a bigger argument that you have to make if you're talking about the entire country. So keep that in mind. You want to have a pretty narrow kind of concentration that you're looking at. I'm also establishing the audience here by specifically saying school boards in North Carolina should consider, right? This is a persuasive paper. You're trying to convince your audience to use the solution that you're proposing to this problem, right? So I've established the problem by saying that a lot of students don't have access to natural views, and I'm proposing the solution, which is going to be installing either virtual or real windows in order to solve this problem, right? So all that's happening in my introduction. You want all that to happen in your introduction too. You want to establish what your problem is, you want to establish what your solution is, and you want to establish your audience. And remember our thesis rule. Thesis, when you isolate it, give it to a stranger, it should be pretty obvious what it is that you're arguing, and this is pretty obvious what I'm arguing. I'm arguing toward school boards in North Carolina, and I'm arguing the installation of these windows for a specific reason, which is to benefit North Carolina students. Okay, so moving into our first paragraph. So the way that I did this is basically I'm giving you topic sentences for each of these paragraphs, and then I'm explaining what you would do in your version. So I say approximately 1.5 million school children in North Carolina, among the approximately 1.5 million, many do not have access to natural views. Those children face consequences that students with natural views do not. Notice I've got a citation here as well in CES. This is from an online source that doesn't have page numbers, which is why I don't have a page number listed there, and it's a government body, so I've given the abbreviation of that government body. I'll show you the works cited when we get to that. So essentially what you're doing in this first body paragraph is setting up what your problem is. It's good to explain why your problem is important. So tell me a little bit about what it is that is hurting people about your problem. What is it that is hurting the environment? What are the consequences of this problem not being solved? You want to set that up to show your audience, number one, why they should give a damn about it, and number two, to better strengthen your solution. Because if you're just arguing your solution and your audience isn't really aware of the consequences of your problem, it's going to make your argument a little bit weaker. So there's that. So, right from the get-go, just kind of explaining your problem and why it's bad. I've got topic sentences highlighted as well throughout this. Okay, so then moving into our next one. All students should have the ability to benefit from having natural views, or having views of the natural world, right? So I'm moving from my problem into, what my solution is and what the benefits of solving this problem is. So here I'm going to talk about the benefits with evidence to support what I'm talking about. So I'm going to have research in here. You want to make sure that your research is coming from reliable places. Please do not just trust everything on the internet. Just because you Google something does not mean that it's reliable. You want to be focused on trying to get your research from books, newspapers, scholarly journals, government sources, that kind of thing. And in total, you have to have four sources for this paper, so keep that in mind. So with that being said, I want to show you guys a little trick. Because what I did here, I noticed that I tell you the nature principle would be a good option. What I did with the nature principle is I found a section that talks about some of my issue, right? It's this that I have in the green brackets. And if you'll notice right there, there's a tiny little 13. So that is Lou's reference, right? So if you flip to the back of the book where the references are, they're broken up by chapter. So all you got to do is go into your chapter. In this case, I got this from chapter 2. And then you'll find that reference. See that 13? So here is his reference. So guess what I did? I went to Joiner and I typed in high school landscapes and student performance. And I found the source. Okay? Which is right here. Bam. Found a source, right? So I then used some information from this source as one of my sources. And then I went into these references, and all I did was just kind of quickly scan through these references and look for a title of one of these pieces that sounded like it would, be similar to my argument. And so I found one of those, and I went and did the same thing that I did initially, which was take the title of this thing, just copy and paste it, dump it into Joiner, and it'll pull it right up. So then you know that you're getting sources that are coming from a scholarly place. They're coming from journals, and you know that it's reliable, valuable research. So that's my advice on your trick to find sources. The government source that I use, I basically just Googled, North Carolina Department of Education or something of that nature, and found a website and used that to get my statistic about the 1.5 million students. So that's my argument, that's my advice for you guys, start with the nature principle. The other thing that's cool about the nature principle, if you go all the way to the back, and this is true of most books, there's a thing called an index. Magical. Looks like this. And what this index does is breaks down all these words. It's the topics that are in this book, and all you got to do is find, so say, you know, here's rainforest as an example. Ugh, I'm trying. Thank you. See rainforest right there, 101, that's referring to the page number. So if you find a topic in here in Louvre and then track down that page number, you can find information about your topic. That'll allow you to use Louvre as a reference, and then you can track, you know, if he references somebody, you can find that reference in the book and then, you know, dump it into Joiner, find the reference that way. And you are more than welcome to use multiple sources from Louvre. You can do this over and over. So just keep that in mind. That's a good way to find sources. All right. So now we're moving into this. In addition to students reaping individual benefits, the school system themselves would improve, right? So what I'm doing here is, well, number one, I'm transitioning. Make sure that you're doing these transitions, right? In the last paragraph, I was talking about individual benefits. So I mentioned it again in this transition to set up how it's related to this paragraph. So what I'm doing here is directly addressing my audience, which is the school boards, right? To show them how implementing the solution is going to benefit them as well as, you know, the students that they are overseeing. So this is a good idea to do, because then your audience you're answering that why should I give a damn question. Your audience has a real life benefit that they can get from doing this thing. And I would also be using evidence here. So notice down here I say, one study in Michigan schools showed that students with natural views had both higher standardized test scores and graduation rates, right? So I would include this reference because what is the one thing that school boards really care about? Test scores and graduation rates, right? The higher those rates are, the more, you know, funding they're going to get, the better recognition they're going to get, all that good stuff, the more enrollment, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm showing them how this positively impacts the audience that I've established, which is the school boards. Also, just a quick note, notice that I don't stop this paragraph with somebody else's words. You should try to avoid in academic writing in general ending a paragraph with someone else's thoughts or a direct quote. You always want to kind of circle back around to yourself and put things in your own words.
And for my students, I feel like I'm beating the dead horse here, but look, we've talked about this before, and I'm still seeing it. The punctuation goes after the citation.
Yes, always, always, always. Punctuation is coming at the very, very end of the sentence, never before the citation. Okay? All right. So then I'm moving into kind of the implementation of my solution. So I say to gain the benefits from Windows, they must exist in the first place, obviously. So here I'm going to start explaining how these schools might go about doing this. So what I suggest is that you know, rather than going in and putting a window in every single classroom, because that's just not practical, is taking a shared space like a cafeteria or an auditorium, somewhere that all of the students are going to be at some point in the day, and putting windows in those places to give them at least one opportunity to have a natural view. And again, we're going to keep on bringing up the positive aspects of this solution. So I've got another quote here that, you know, solutions with more natural views score better on tests of directed attention, et cetera, et cetera. So, you're constantly kind of bringing up what the benefits of your solution are. And you definitely want to have some kind of plan for implementing this, right? Like you can't just say, well, school kids need windows. Okay, great. But how are they going to get them? You know, you have to have some idea of a plan for how this thing would actually happen. So that's what I'm doing in that paragraph. And then we're moving into this one. If adding real windows to buildings cannot happen due to budget or other restrictions, schools could invest in virtual windows. So here I'm expanding on my solution. This kind of automatically sets up for the counter argument that would come from this. The most common counter argument that would come from this would be there's not enough funding. There's not enough funding. Well, one solution to fix that is pretty much every school everywhere has a projector, and you can take a projector and set it up in the cafeteria and do the same exact thing, but you project, you know, that natural view rather than building a real window. So I'm setting up the counter argument without even having to mention the counter argument. So just keep in mind, though, that if you're going to establish a counter argument, you have to have an answer for it. Remember in the meat paper that student brings up how vegetables are really good for your body and then just kind of leaves it. You can't do that. You have to have a counter argument to the counter argument that you set up. So if you think of a counter argument and you can't think of a solution to that counter argument, don't mention it in your paper, because it's weakening your argument to point out flaws without, backing up or solving those flaws. So just keep that in mind. All right. And then we move into our conclusion. So implementing natural views via real or virtual windows would greatly improve North Carolina student performance, which in turn benefits school boards, right? So I'm restating my thesis here. I'm also, reestablishing that my audience is North Carolina school boards, and we are keeping in mind that your conclusion wants to have your main arguments stated back, because that's the last thing that your reader is left with. So you want your conclusion to kind of go back through and say X, Y, and Z. Here's the things that I want you to remember. So I would if I wrote this conclusion more fully, I would say, the windows benefit students, they improve test scores, they do this, whatever, and so that would be beneficial to school boards. And that's essentially it. So feel free to structure your paper this way. My kids, that I don't really care how you organize things, as long as your organization is logical. You don't need to jump from counter argument back to one of the solutions, back to the benefits, back to the counter argument. You need to have a logical solution. You do have to have a logical solution, but logical organization. All right, and so here I've got our works cited. I've given you guys a good little spread here. So this first one is from a journal. That's what your citation is going to look like if you're citing from a journal. This is from the Nature Principle. If you use the Nature Principle, you can literally copy and paste this citation. It's already made for you. Here's another one that's from a journal. And finally, this last one is a government resource. So notice that I've written out what the name of the section of the government is, and then given this little abbreviation. That's so that when I do my in-text citation, I don't have to write this huge name over and over and over again, right? And so this is essentially how you're going to cite anything that comes from on the internet. It's going to look approximately like this. But of course, if you have an actual person that's the author of an article, you're going to list the person there instead of an entity, which is what I'm doing here. So, feel free to use these sources as example sources. I feel like there's a good chance that a number of you will use some kind of government resources. And we're also remembering to get sources from reliable places. Please do not just trust anything you see on the internet. Please remember to cite, all that good stuff.
And I feel like I got off kind of light today. But for my students, I'll post the digital copy of the document that you just saw on Blackboard when you'll obviously already have seen the link because you clicked on it and watched it, but it'll be below that, so you can follow along, you can take a look at it later. Email me with any questions. As normal. Hope you guys are having a great week so far.
Yep, and for my students, same thing. You can find this document on Blackboard under the Project 3 tab, like I usually do. Scroll all the way to the bottom, it's down there in there. Project 2 grades, by the way. So for my 9 o'clock kids, you're getting graded last, because I graded you guys first last time, and I always swap. So I'm going to, in theory, have grading done by Wednesday. Don't hold your breath. I'm going to try. I've already graded about 10 papers from my 11 o'clock class. So some of you guys from my 11 o'clock already have grades in. You can go check those out. I'm going to try to finish up my 11 o'clock class today. So look for that. I'm not going to make any promises again. It might not happen, but I'm certainly going to try. And if not by Wednesday, definitely by Friday, I'll have it done, because I have 2201 papers that I have to grade too. All I do is grade. So yeah, that's about it.
That's it.
Got anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
Stay safe.
Yeah, stay safe. Email if you have questions. Feel free to kick me just to say hello. I mean, you don't have to necessarily email me because of class stuff. You can just drop in and say hey. So be safe, guys.
Have a good one.
Bye.